Okay, students, welcome back. So as we are discussing that, we did not use any base class constructor to initialize the base class data member when we creating the derived class object. So let's sum up these two things together. Let's put them together. Let's try to understand the difference between inherited derived class. Here is derived class is the inherited derived class, and non-inherited class. Here base class is the non-inherited class. So in the first case, we created a base class object, and in the second case, we have created the derived class object. Let's put them together and let's try to understand what is happening at the background in both the scenario. At first, before the derived class constructor can do anything substantial, the base class constructor called first. Okay, so this line going to call the base class constructor first before it's doing anything to the derived class constructor. The base constructor sets up the base portion of the object. So now try to understand main part here in the inheritance. Although derived class is inheriting the properties and member function, we call them behavior of base class, but the duty to initialize the data member of the base class of derived object is the responsibility of the base class constructor. So means we need to know how to call the base class constructor from a derived class constructor while we creating the derived class object. Okay, so means the initialization remain with the constructor of the same class. Okay, third point that we have control is returned to the derived class constructor, and after initializing the base class constructor, and the derived constructor is allowed to finish up its job. So derived constructor have nothing to do how to initialize the base class constructor till this example. Okay, so it's going to use default constructor for that. So what last the derived class object will have, derived class object will have garbage value for the base part, and it have 1.3 for the derived class data member. Now try to understand what is the problem in our derived class here. What is the problem in our derived classes? The problem is that look at the initializer list that we are using with the derived class constructor. We did not call any base class constructor here, neither we use any name or any data member of the base class to initialize the base class data member. So now question is that what will be the solution to this? Suppose we try to do this. Suppose as a as a programmer, you try to do this. We try to access m underscore id. M underscore id is what? It is a public data member of the base class, and we try to put this 0 to this m underscore id. That means what we are trying here, we try to initialize base class part using derived class initializer list. So you might think it might be a good attempt, it might be a good idea, right idea for you to pass another parameter to the derived class object, another parameter to derived class object, and you are going to use that parameter to initialize the base class data member as part of the initializer list of the derived class. The thing is that it will not work. It will not work. Okay. So here might be raise some question why it will not work. Okay, why it will not work? Because I told you in the last lecture also, last video also, that base class data member will be initialized by the base class constructor itself. Although we are inheriting the property, but we cannot have the access to initialize them. We can change their values, but we cannot initialize them when we creating the derived class object using the derived class constructor. So doing this will not work for you. It will raise a compile time error here. Then what will be the solution? Then how to do this? If previous one is also not done, this one is also not working for us, then what will be the solution? Let's come with the solution now. Okay, so this is the scenario we have now. What are you thinking? We are thinking to pass two argument to the derived class constructor. So we are passing two argument to the derived class constructor. And we are calling now base class constructor. Look at the name that we are calling here. base class constructor. We are calling the base class constructor now because we know that before calling the derived class constructor, base class data member of that derived object need to be initialized first. Okay, so what we are doing, 1.3 is passed to the cost and 5 is passed to the id while you creating the object of derived class inside the main method. Okay, so what we are doing now, see, in the initializer list we are calling the base class constructor here explicitly and we are using uniform initializer. Okay, or you can use the direct method also to initialize the data member. Okay, parenthesis you can also use. Here I am using uniform initializer to call the base class constructor. So what I am doing, I am passing the value of id. What is the value of id? Value of id is 5, passing to the base class constructor. I am calling the base class constructor here. So control will go back to the base class constructor and 5 will be passed here and m underscore id of the derived object will get the value 5. After that, control will come back to the derived class constructor initializer list and m underscore cost of the derived class will get the value 1.3, which is we have passed from the main method. Okay, so what will happen in this case? Let's see the next part of the code. We are try to retrieve the value using get and get id. What is get id? Get id is a public member function of the base class. So as you all know, while we inheriting a class from another class, derived class can acquire, derived class not can acquire, mistake, wrong statement I have used here. Derived class acquired the behaviors also, as well as behavior as well as the properties also. Here behavior means the member functions. So now we are accessing get id member function of base class using the derived class object. Okay, so what it will do, it going to return the value of id of derived part, not the base part. Okay, derived part. So what is the value of id of derived part? 5. And next, what he is doing is going to call another member function called get cost. What is get cost? Get cost is a public member function which returning the value of m underscore cost. So what is the value of f underscore cost? So the value of m underscore cost will be 1.3 here. So what will be the output? Output will be 5 and then 1.3. So I hope you'll get the idea here what we make the changes. If you go back, we started with this problem, then can we directly access the base class data member from the initializer list of derived class? Answer is no. Then what is the solution? Solution is that before initializing the derived class data member using derived class initializer list, we must call the base class constructor as part of the derived class initializer list. Okay, so this will be probably our solution here. Now, one final thing that I'm going to ask you, that why we always make the data member as public in the base class. We'll cover this part in detail as the mode of inheritance. Okay, so let's change this code here little bit. What will be the final code? Now look at this. Now we are converting the public data member to private data member in the base class, and other thing we have remained same. We did not change anything. Look at the previous code. We simply change the base class here. Previously, base class or everything is public. Now what we did, that we follow in our lectures, that I always suggest you that declare data member as private as always and declare member function as public. So this base is what? Base is a constructor of what type? Public type. So while we inherit base class to derived class, public part is available here. So we are calling the public part. So there will be no issue and we are passing the value. So here we can say this code is more safe than previous code, because previous code m underscore id is a public, but here m underscore id of the base class is private. But still there will be no problem because we are calling the public constructor here from the base class initializer list. Okay, so what will be the idea here? Idea will be that we are going to declare the data member as private for the time being, and we are going to call the public constructor from the derived class to initialize the base class part of the derived object. Okay, so our output will be remain same without make any effect. I hope your idea is clear. Okay, so this is the changes that we have made. Okay, go back one more time. one more time. Yeah, this is the changes we have made. Okay. So now, a few questions that we need to discuss. What will be the issue if we C++ allow us to do this? If C++ allow us to call a base class data member from a derived class initialization list. So one question I'll keep it for you. Try to find the answer of this question. Why C++ doesn't allow to initialize base data member using derived initialization list? Okay. Another question for you. What will be the problem if C++ allow this? In first question is try to find the solution. Why it is not doing. Then more or less they are same kind of question, but try to find the answer of them. If suppose C++ allow to do this, what will be the problem? Okay. So I expect if you will find the answer. If you not find the answer, I expect I'll appreciate you. Please put your comment against this video. Then I'll hope some of you can answer reply to that query, or I'll encourage you. You can post your question in the Google group that I have created at the very beginning of the semester. Okay. So I hope you understand this. In the very next video, we're going to see the demonstration how this thing is working together. Okay. So before we start the next topic, modes of inheritance, we're going to see the inheritance, this part, that when you're creating the derived class object, how can we initialize derived class data member using derived class constructor, as well as how can we initialize base class data member using derived class constructor. We're going to see as part of the demonstration in Dev C++ ID. Hope the idea is clear here. Thank you very much.